the same language, but we never form actual bonds with each other. It's easy just to give money to the poor, but to build friendships with people who are different than you, that's really hard. The church's job is to help poor people. In Luke 3:11, John says, "Anyone who has 2 shirts must give one to the person who doesn't have any." But is the church equipped to handle this task? Is the church educated enough? Well, that's why we're bringing in Rebecca. Rebecca has been there. She was born and raised in generational poverty and is one of the very few to get out of it. And she's here to educate us about poverty and about the Circles program. She currently works at SDAC teaching teachers about generational poverty. I met her when she came to speak to the teachers at Buhler Grade School. And her testimony is truly miraculous. And she's also worked with churches as well. So, Rebecca, on behalf of Buhler Mennonite Church, I'd like to thank you for coming, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you very much. So if I don't put that up there, I'll forget to do it because I'm really nervous. So will you guys just pray with me? Father God, I just ask that you come with your Holy Spirit upon me, that you, I know you've prepared this way before me, and I'm so humbled to be in front of your children. And I just ask that you help me to pull out the parts of my story that will speak to those that are sitting today here to listen, and that you can bless all of us deeper with your work. Amen. So I like to, how did I get here? I like to go back just a little bit. That's my mom. She was the baby. She's the youngest of 5 kids. She had a high-ranking military official for a father. They lived in Riverside, California. Custom-built home in the 50s, first family on their block to get a color television. Her dad had come home and was there through all of her 0 through 5 experience. And one day, because of a lot of adult issues, my grandma packed up all 5 kids, put them in the station wagon, and left. And because things were bad, they all fell into poverty. And my grandma started working multiple jobs in the city in California, and we had the onset of the 60s, and so the 2 boys there, my mom's 2 older brothers, they kind of started raising her, and a lot of you can probably connect dots as to what happens to unattended children in the 60s in the cities in California. So lots of crazy, lots of fast stuff, lots of hard stuff for my mom, when she was close to her dad, and so I always show this picture because she always describes it at 5 years old when the family fell apart. She was just shattered, and there really wasn't anybody there to help her pick up the pieces. She got pregnant with me young, and her family told her, they said, if you have this baby out of wedlock, we're not going to help you. So my mom moved towards the social service systems and got on welfare, and here I come. And so I still get really nervous. My mom, a single young mother in the 70s, she just didn't have a lot of equipment, and had a lot of stuff going on from her own story. And so I always tell people that from 0 to 5, I saw more things in my life than I've ever seen the entire rest of my life. Lots of sex, lots of drugs, lots of violence. My mom got addicted to heroin when I was 3. My grandma, who had got a career later on, she retired, and she looked at what was going on, and she said, I'm going to take Becky, and we're going to move to Kansas. And she told my mom, she said, you can either go or you can stay. And my mom did some serious soul searching and got clean, and we all loaded up and came to Kansas, McPherson, Kansas in 1979. And so the first day I got to McPherson, I was allowed to go outside with my cousins and ride bikes up and down the road, which was amazing because in the cities in California, you can't go outside without an adult. And then that night there were fireflies, and I thought they were only in Disney movies, and I was like, wow. There was snow. It was just so much more gentle. But I always like to point out to people that McPherson's, predominantly a middle-class community. And so me and my hippie single mother, we did not stand out at all. Grade school was amazing. I had some amazing teachers in grade school. I loved to go. I was the kid that got an alarm clock in 2nd grade for my birthday, and would get myself up, and I could wear all the makeup I wanted, and Pippi Longstocking was my hero at that point, and so, that's how I kind of showed up at school. But even as a little kid, I always was aware of, the name of our landlord, when the rent was due, when the light bill was due. There was always issues around food. There was always issues around fuel. I was just aware of those things. And laundry. Laundry was always just a stressful thing. And so, but it's when I got to middle school, where the buildings kind of converge into one building, that it kind of dawned on me, looking at other kids, that I was poor. That we weren't just poor, we were really poor. And my parents, they had this car that, I don't know who does this, but every piece of metal on that car was a different color. And it looked like a Blues Brothers car, and it smoked. And so I started making my family drop me off, far away from school, and I would walk a few blocks. And I wanted to be in extracurricular activities. And kids around, and I don't think this is just my story, I've talked to lots of kids, but around 6th, 7th grade, kids from poverty will kind of stop asking their parents for things because they know there's just not enough money. And so, extracurricular stuff, which is what kids desperately need to kind of thrive, it became apparent to me that that wasn't going to be available for me. Also, I've thought a lot about this, and I've told my story a lot of times, and I can't remember one teacher that cared about me in middle school. And so, things were hard at home, things were hard socially with girls at school, and I lost that warm, fuzzy experience of school with educators. And so things just got really dark for me in middle school. And I just remember that I kind of figured out that my number one job was to make sure that teachers couldn't teach. So I would just spend all of my time seeing how long I could take each hour that we changed classes, from keeping a teacher from opening their lesson plan. So I was that kid, and I got my first job when I was 13, waiting tables at Sirloin Stockade in McPherson. I figured out pretty quickly that the managers would look the other way if I started to wait tables under the table, because they were always shorthanded. And so, by the time I rented my first trailer house when I was 15 in the ghetto in McPherson, Kansas. There is a ghetto over by Mr. B's. And got the lights turned on, and I had my sights set on my 16th birthday. I knew that on my 16th birthday I was going to quit school, and I was going to go out into the world, and I was going to find a house on the hill like I saw girls having on the other side of town. I was going to go out and I was going to find the life that I saw other people having. So on my 16th birthday, I called the school and I said, I'm quitting, and they said, good. And my family called the school and said, she's dropping out. And they said, honestly, we don't know how to help her. She's light years ahead of other kids. She does nothing but cause problems here, and we just don't know what to do with her. And so, I did leave state to go off and find my life. And, this is what I found. I found a life where I was working crazy hours. It was always about the rent. It was always about the food. It was always about the light bill. It was always about the laundry. It was always about the car. And not long after I got out on my own, I became addicted. And so I was doing far worse than my parents, which in my mind I was going to, surpass them easily and readily. I also fell in love with someone who was really, really, really unhealthy for me, and we got married. And lots of abuse, lots of addiction, lots of violence, lots of crazy. And my grandma, she had taken me to church from the time I was little, and I had good people from the church that picked me up and took me home in grade school. So I always had Jesus. I always had Jesus, and I always prayed. And so after getting married, I was in this life where I was terrified and lots of bad stuff happening, but I didn't feel like I had permission to leave. And so when I was 29 years old, things were just horrible. And one day after an episode with him, I just heard God say, Rebecca, you can go. And so I left. He stalked me at my job, so I couldn't be there. He got my truck and made it so it wouldn't run anymore, killed the dog. I had very few possessions. They were, I put them in a storage shed, and he found the storage shed and pulled them all out and lit them on fire in front of the storage shed. So I had nothing. So I was homeless, no car, no job, no money, broken from 13 years of an incredibly abusive marriage. And I found myself pregnant with my first baby at age 29. And I remember, here comes this little person. And I remember just looking down thinking, holy smokes, I swore I'd never be a single mother, and I swore I'd never raise kids in poverty. And here I was, and I felt powerless to stop it. Like, I have to do something. So I enrolled in college full-time, I went back to work full-time, and my new baby cried full-time. And so I remember being in my trailer, and every day I would just watch the clock, and I'd be like, is it time to go to work? Is it time to go to school? Because I didn't know what to do with this little person. So fast forward about 9 years later, 2 more failed relationships and 2 more little boys. I was back in McPherson, Kansas, in a trailer house in the ghetto that I had bought for $1,000. There were holes in the floor. I mean, honestly, if you opened the front door, you had to step over a hole that if you were not careful, you would lose a small child in it. There were roaches, the water heater didn't work, broken out windows. I had a car that was faithful to nothing but breakdowns. The dog was sick. I couldn't afford to take the dog to the vet. And my oldest kid and my youngest, they were just like wild. I was just thoroughly convinced it was because I was a bad parent. The verdict is still out on that, but both my oldest and my youngest since then have been diagnosed with autism. So, every single day that I got up, I just felt like this, like I was running as fast as I could, and I prayed and I prayed. Jeremiah 29:11, I mean, in my hardest, darkest hours through my entire life, that verse would show up in hard copy in just weird ways. I mean, God would just send me that verse. And I always thought, okay, I believe this, and I believe that there's a plan and a path for me, but I always thought my prosperity would come in heaven. I mean, I've talked to a lot of other families, and that's how a lot of families in poverty think about that. So I was going to the church. I was visiting a church, the First United Methodist Church in McPherson, Kansas. They had a diaper ministry, and I would go there and get diapers for my youngest. And I hated to go get diapers, but I built a relationship with the secretary in there. She knew my name. She knew my kids' names. When she saw me, she would light up. I would talk to her. One day I was in there, and I had tears streaming down my face, and I told her, I said, I can't tell you how much these diapers mean to me. I promise that when I get my kids to a better place, I said, we're going to come here and give back so that other moms can experience this. And she just lovingly pointed to a flyer that said something about a class to get out of poverty. And my first thought was, what are these people going to teach me about poverty that I don't already know? And my next thought was, man, I've got so many diapers from this lady, I better sign up. And I want to fast forward or go back just a little bit. I was still in college 9 years later trying to get a 4-year degree. Just lots of crisis and instability, but I knew I wasn't going to get that. And I wanted to be a high school art teacher. And so I was in this class for educators, and it was all about culture. And it was a class designed to uncover your sandpaper, which is code word for prejudice. And the idea was that if you could figure out, what group of people that you had a hard time with when you became an educator and that population was in front of you, that you would be better equipped to teach these kind of kids. And so, you spend a lot of time in this class with the instructor kind of dancing around, owning your population of people. And so it was that time, because the assignment was that once you claimed your population of people that you struggled with, you would find a way to go out in the community and spend time with this population of people. And she pulled me out into the hallway and she said, okay, Rebecca, come on, who is it? And I knew from day one. And I said, honestly, it's middle-class people, and primarily middle-class girls. And she said, well, your assignment is just to keep coming to class. And so I went out in my car that day, you guys, and I got in my car and I just started praying. And I said, God, I need you to help me. I said, I don't want to be this way. I need you to help me. I don't want to have this grudge against an entire population of people that I don't even really know because of some stuff that happened when I was younger. I need you to help me. So when I got in front of that secretary with this opportunity to go to this class, I worked every night of the week. I was 7 months clean and sober. I was bartending or in school every night except Thursday nights. And that was when the class was. So, and I was terrified, you guys. My kids were wild, and we did not go to things after school. We didn't go to extracurricular activities. When I brought them in the church, they literally started to climb the walls, because first you come for a meal and then you go into this class. And I'm like, well, these people are going to kick me out immediately because of my children. And I got there and everybody acted like it wasn't even happening. And they just met me with love, and I expected to have this kind of judgment when I walked in that said, here's how you fix your life, here's where you're messed up. And I just was met with this incredible experience with these people that kind of seemed to know where I had been, and they kind of seemed to be telling some of my story. And they said, Rebecca, we looked out into our community and we saw families struggling. We think that poverty is the root cause of it, and we need experts like you to help us solve it. So immediately they empowered me and they disarmed me all in that conversation. And I left there that night, you guys, with so much hope. I mean, I felt like I was floating in my car, and I just was praying out loud to God. Because what is interesting to me is that from the time I was 13 years old and I clocked in at my first job, I thought I was getting out of poverty the whole time. So I started to get into this curriculum and into this experience with these people in this class, other people like me. And I started to discover that, holy smokes, middle-class people and generationally poor people, we don't even speak the same language. We don't look at anything the same, and it's no wonder we're always bumping up against each other and we're not getting anywhere. And I also started to recognize that I was an expert at putting out fires in my life, but I didn't know anything about fire prevention. And then they also talked about, a timeline, and how middle-class people can typically see 4 to 10 years out. And I sat there that night and I looked, you guys, I couldn't see past 2 weeks. It was like it was fuzzy up here, and I just remember thinking, wow. So I realized, through some of the work some of the things that were identified there, that I was really in survival mode. Really talks about right now, and you're just constantly problem solving all the time, and you're exhausted, but you really don't think about, okay, how do I get these problems to stop happening to me? Because you're just going from one thing to the next. So anyways, I fell in love with this thing called Circles. I fell in love with everybody there. One day I called the coach because I had all these incompletes. I was working. I was going through all these mental health diagnoses with my kids. Things were really, really hard. I called the coach at Circles and I said, look, I have to take a step back from college. I'm not going to be able to finish. I can't deal with this. It's really, really difficult. And she said, absolutely not, Rebecca. She said, you will not take a step back from college. You will go in and talk to your professors, and you will tell them what's going on, and you will keep going. She said, I don't care how hard it is. She said, if you don't, this is never going to stop happening to you. And I hung up the phone with her, you guys, and I won't tell you the word that I called her because we're in a church. But I was so mad. I was like, this lady doesn't get it. She doesn't get it. She was right. After a decade, finally, the first person in my family, immediate or extended, I walked the stage and got my bachelor's degree. Not long after that, a position came open at Circles for the coach, and I applied, and they hired me. And I'm still thoroughly convinced that they hired me because nobody else applied. I have the file cabinet. There's no other applications in there. But they hired me. And then, so now I get to work with families and I know where they come from. They trust me instinctively because they know. First, is a small town. A lot of people know where I came from. They know the story that I tell. And so it works incredibly well. And the pastor that was over the First United Methodist Church, he and his wife, they got called to a new appointment. So we were doing a send-off for them. And his wife came over to me, and she just kind of grabbed my elbow, and she said, Rebecca, she said, I think that God brought you here to do this work. And I just looked around, and it's like everything stopped for a minute. It was really surreal. And I said, it's like my whole life makes sense now. All the bad stuff that I've done, all the bad stuff I've done as a parent, all the stuff that happened to me, there's a purpose for it now. I can use it for good. Not long after that, the pastor, the new appointed pastor of that church, called me and said, Rebecca, she said, we want to hire you to be our outreach coordinator. So now I'm the diaper lady, and I run the food ministry and the benevolent fund. And so the first time I'm in Walmart, I get in there, and it's just me and God. This huge shopping cart full of diapers. And I've got it loaded so full, and I'm pushing it, and diapers are falling off the front. I'm putting them back on, and I'm just crying. And I get up to the checkout line, and that lady, when I got up there, I have all these diapers. I'm bawling. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you poor thing," So now I'm the lady when families come in, and I can just pray with them and replicate this experience. I always like to say that if you have 3 little boys by 3 different dads, and you're lucky, you can have a Neapolitan family like me. These are my reasons. So, a lot of times we hear people, when we talk about getting clean and sober, we hear a lot of times, you have to do it for you. Well, I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a stopping problem. Every time I would stop drinking, I would go straight to the hospital with DTs. I drank a half gallon of vodka every day for about 4 years. So if I didn't drink, I was incredibly ill. And it got to this really terrifying place where I was afraid if I didn't drink, I was going to die, and if I did drink, I was going to die. It was horrible, and I was looking at these 3 little boys who didn't ask to come here, who I brought here, who God brought here, and just looking at them and thinking, holy smokes, Rebecca, if you don't figure out what to do, they're going to be talking to a headstone for a mother. And so, you know, God led me to a group of amazing people, and these little boys were really my motivation to get better. And so, and then along the way, being sober became about me. These are what I say, you know, these are my power women. You know, these are the women that when I got to Circles, they said, Rebecca, we see something in you, and we're going to hold you up until you can see it in yourself, and then you're going to go out and you're going to do that for other people. And so just really, really grateful for that. And, you know, it's crazy because I always remember that prayer that I said that day in the parking lot at college of, God, I need you to help me, and I don't want to be this way. And you know what I figured out is that middle-class people were nothing like I thought. That had all these misconceptions about them, these judgments that I'd nursed, and you know, from a couple of isolated incidents, and you know, just really, and now I have an incredible amount of middle-class friends that I'm close to and that I love and that love my kids, and I even have a couple wealthy friends, and you know, and so he answered that prayer through the building of relationships. This is one of my graduating classes from Circles. They take an 18-week class when they first come in, and then they stay on for 18 months to 5 years. And you know, lots of these families are from the trailer park, and I always like to say, you know, this is my tribe. This is where I come from. This is my native language. I get how these families think. I get some of the things that they do. And you know, I really feel like this is the population that God has called me to serve. And so I don't care where I go and how many people, different kinds of people I get to be close to, this will always be my people. So Circles, I want to share a little bit with you about Circles and what that is. But if I try and talk to you about it, your eyes will glaze over because there's so many moving parts, so I'm just going to show you a video.
Getting ahead isn't easy when you're trapped in the cycle of poverty. Circles is breaking the cycle by building community one friendship at a time. The Dubuque Circles Initiative is part of a national movement to create relationships that raise people out of poverty.
$50.4 million people in the United States currently live in poverty. 16 million of these people are children. And in our own community, almost 7,000 fellow Dubuquers live in poverty. Circles addresses poverty by building supporting community around individuals who wish to rise out of poverty.
Circles is a national campaign that addresses poverty by increasing an individual's social capital. And we do that by matching up low-income individuals who have set goals for themselves with community members who are going to join them in their journey in transitioning from poverty into a sustaining lifestyle.
Circles creates a network of relationships. Circles gathers people living in poverty, volunteers, and community leaders and organizations. Together, these community members learn to understand poverty and its causes, address barriers that block families from making their way out of poverty, and provide a support community for individuals who are making the journey out of poverty.
Poverty is about more than just economics. There are all kinds of things, all kinds of resources that a family needs to be sustainable. Just improving somebody's circumstantial situation through money, through food, through clothing, that doesn't improve or change the way that they deal with their environment, deal with their community, deal with their lives. But if you start talking about relationship, then you're asking people to cross barriers of understanding.
Circles crosses these relationship barriers with allies who are individuals in the community that are there to support those in need of assistance. Candy was one of those in poverty who found guidance through her involvement with Circles.
Every day is a struggle. When you're a single mom, it's hard to get up and go to school all day, then have to work all night, come home and you're tired and you have how much homework to do. What made me want to change from my previous lifestyle was I wasn't getting anywhere. I was repeating the same things over and over, and I wanted my children to have a really good life.
Her story was pretty overwhelming. And we just came away with thinking, wow, how can someone who's gone through all of that be this great a person at this point in her life? How can anyone that has had this many struggles, and there's been a few bad choices, but overall, this was a person that we knew had so much potential.
I think Candy's very open with us, you know. It's rewarding to me just to have her ask me for advice.
What I think is really important about the whole thing is belonging to something. For me, I was looking for someone just to care, someone that could text me or call me and just ask how my day is going, someone that I could call and let them know exciting news, just someone who cared and was interested in mine and my children's life. For my daughter's birthday party, Judy offered to cook sloppy joes, and they couldn't make it for the birthday party, so they just dropped off the sloppy joes in a crock pot, and since Kaylin, my daughter, was having a sleepover that night, Judy also took it upon herself to bring milk and cereal, so that way they had something to eat in the morning. And that was just amazing to me, because that was something really small to somebody, but to me that was...
It's a really good feeling. It's, you know, you create a really good bond, close relationship, and so yeah, you get a new friend.
Circles need strong support from every segment of the community. We need individuals and families who have made the journey out of poverty and can now lead the way for others. We need community leaders and organizations who want to honestly address the barriers that keep families in poverty. And we need volunteers who want to learn about the true nature of poverty and offer their support.
In the future, I want to own my own home. That's very important to me. I want to complete college and just really be able to provide for my children.
Circles. Join the movement.
It's kind of crazy. Kansas has more circle sites than any other state in the country. They've just been popping up everywhere. So Hutch, Newton, Salina, Marion, McPherson, Wichita, Topeka, Kiowa County. There's a lot of them. Project 17, which is southeast Kansas. So, you know, there's lots of different ways, and it's hard for people to, you know, it's hard to talk about poverty. Talking about poverty is kind of like talking about race, but sometimes you have to have some clear definitions for what we're working with. A lot of the families that I work with, they didn't even know that poverty was what was causing a lot of the stress in their life because they didn't think that they were in poverty. Just because it's better to have something to measure and goals to work towards, we define people in poverty if they're under 200% of the federal poverty guideline. So for example, me as a single mom with 3 little boys, to be qualified as out of poverty, economic poverty, I needed to bring my household income up to $48,700 a year. The first year that I came into Circles, I had made under $10,000. And lots of the families I work with make under $10,000 when they come in, and so they're really in survival mode. So in McPherson, we have gotten 21 adults and 27 children out of economic poverty, defined at 200% of the federal poverty guideline. And 4 of those were single moms. And so it's not a quick fix, it's really messy, but that's what we do. My mom, in 2013, my dad went into a nursing home, and my mom was just kind of left to pick up the piece that she'd had incredible health issues that she had kind of gotten through, but she was 60 years old, and you know, her life was just kind of in shambles. And I said, Mom, I said, why don't you come to Circles? And she said, I'm 60 years old, Rebecca. She said, what is Circles going to do for me? And I said, well, I don't know, but there's free food there, and your grandkids are there every Thursday night. So she's like, okay, I'll come to Circles. And you know, in January of 2014, I was working 3 jobs, but me and my little boys, we left economic poverty defined at 200%. And in February of 2014, my mom picked up a second job, and at 60 years old, she left economic poverty, defined at 200% for the first time since she was 5. My niece, she was pulled out of school in 7th grade in Lyons, and kind of came to me a couple years ago with her life just kind of in shambles as well. And you know, I told her, I said, you can stay with me, you'll get your GED, and you'll go to college, get your associate's degree. You won't take out any student loans, and you'll stay with me so that you can get that associate's degree debt-free. And so she passed her GED, and this was hard for her. GED's probably harder to pass than high school. And she just completed her first semester at Hutchinson Community College. So, you know, it's pretty crazy. And that's not an isolated story to have grandma, mom, grandkids all under one roof inside of a Circles fellowship. So that's kind of how we talk about poverty and how the measuring stick that we use. Some of you have had me before, so don't give it away, but just turn to your neighbors and kind of talk about, you know, what is the #1 concrete cause of poverty in America today? Discuss. You guys are all coming up with very incredible answers, I know that. But I want you to think about the #1 concrete cause of poverty in America today it's birth. Click. There you go. 880,000 kids every year. And you know, these are our families that are working retail. These are our families working in restaurants. You know, and so concretely, you know, this is every year, you know, we're seeing this. And you know, 320,000 of those kids are born into abject poverty, households that I define abject poverty as households earning less than $12,000 a year. So they're really bringing home $800 a month. And you know, with rent and the way that things are, this just sends families into this constant circular life experience of just constantly problem solving because they cannot stop bad things from happening to them. I've thought a lot about this, and it took me a while to figure it out and to kind of own it. Me and my kids, we were part of that 25%. I really honestly believe, had we not bumped up against Circles, had I not had that coach in my life that said, you're not going to stop college, Rebecca, you're going to go in there, you're going to make it happen, I really think that I would have put college on hold. I'd still probably be trying to get my 4-year degree. I was out of school loan money by that point anyways. I was having to pay to go to school. I really think I wouldn't have a degree. I'd probably still be working in restaurants and bars because that's what I knew. And so, you know, it took me a while to figure that out. But without interventions, 25% never escape in their lifetime. And so that's who I'm after. You guys, do we 1020, 1030? Help me. 1020, okay. Oh, I need to not be so blind. Come on. I'm sorry.
First, I'd like to thank Rebecca for volunteering me that I was speaking tonight at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I apologize for any hiccups. My name is Sherry, and I guess my new and good is being here this evening and having the opportunity to speak with all of you. Let's see where I came from. I came from a single-parent household. Very angry, bitter woman raised me. And I was emancipated at the age of 16 with no car, no license, no ID, nowhere to live, no job, no prospects. The only people I knew were the people that I had met in juvie because I had run away from the very angry, bitter woman I mentioned earlier. That led me to a life of hanging out and eventually marrying the wrong kind of people. And I had 2 beautiful children. I said, I can't live like this anymore. And I tried to be a mom from a background without knowing how. When I started Circles, 2 children, no job, no car, no license, almost no house. I was getting there real quick. And Circles really helped me turn all that around. Found a job, got a car. They helped me get my license back. And at that point, I really felt like, hey, I've done it. I'm there. Look at me. And then I started getting frustrated because I'm still broke. You know, I work and I'm still in poverty. I have a car and I still don't know how to keep it running all the time. And the thing that has helped me the most in Circles is even through that frustration, I had people that encourage me, keep going, it's gonna be okay. It gets very hard when the objective is to get yourself out of poverty and you're like, okay, where do I go now? And Circles has really gone above and beyond to network and find out, okay, where do we go now? I had a meeting today at Central Christian College. I will be starting either in October or December, depending on which day it is. And I will be able to get my bachelor's within a few years. And I have a direction. When you live in poverty and life is hard every day, you feel like you want to withdraw from everybody sometimes, or I do, because I don't want to be that person that just needs you to help me. I don't want the handout. I want to know how to get out. And Circles has always looked for a way for that to happen. And that's why I'm here. My allies are Amy and Carrie Ann, and Amy helps me with the organization because it's not my strong skill, and and she lends an eye ear, and so do you. So I guess tonight I get to come in and talk about having hope again. And sometimes that stagnates, and we need people around us that can tell us, hey, you're gonna get through this too. Because otherwise, once you start losing hope, it all seems to go downhill. So that's what Circles has done for me.
So for time's sake, I'm going to skip. I was at a bookstore in Newton, and I found this little tiny book, and the bookstore had all these incredible sales, and I bought it. And turned out it was a book from the presidential prayer breakfast speech that Bono from U2 gave. And it just really intrigued me, and this was one of the things that was in there. And something that struck me in that book, and I've started to put it into my life. You know, he was talking to a wise man, and the wise man said, you keep asking God to bless your work, don't you? And Bono said, yeah, and he said, stop doing that. He said, ask God to take you deeper into his work because it's already blessed. About a month ago, I got a job offer, and it would be more money, and there were some things going on in my own household that money was an issue. So for an entire month, I just prayed, God, take me deeper into your work, whatever that is. Last weekend, he fixed the money issues, and he gave me this confirmation that working with families in Circles, working with families in poverty, that for me, that's his work, and that's where I can stay to be blessed. And so, you know, this was one of the verses that was in that book too, and it just spoke to me. Families in poverty are messy. I was really messy. It's messy work. It's incredibly crazy rewarding to watch families come in and have transformation, but it's sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly for families. And I thought a lot about it, and I just think in my mind, I just wonder, I would venture to say that families, when Jesus was on the earth with us, I doubt if the poor families were any less messy then than they are now. You know, and there's so much strength, and there's beautiful things about families in poverty. And honestly, as I've climbed out of poverty, I've lost some of that in myself. I mean, I just have a different focus now, and none of it is right or wrong to me anymore. It's just the way that it is. But I'm so blessed by and some of the families that come to Circles, they will never get out because there's health issues or there's mental health stuff going on. And shouldn't say never. It's just we can change the focus for them. And but we just build this incredible community. This is an important slide to me. And I decided when I started to do this work that I was going to be as vulnerable as I could because I thought it would be useful. You know, I was a meth addict for a long time. I switched from meth to alcohol at the onset of my 30s. And I really think that my mom got a card shower from our family. I mean, I think they were like, look, she's not addicted to meth anymore. She's a drunk. That's legal. But alcohol almost killed me, and because I drank like I used, and I did have a crazy childhood, and a lot of things happened in my marriage, but in 2006, you guys, and I always read my Bible, and I always prayed, and I would float from church to church. I didn't want to connect in a church because I was ashamed, but I would just visit churches for worship. But in 2006, I started to get down on my hands and knees every night, regardless of the shape that I was in, and I just started to beg God to make me a good mom, to help me, and to not let anybody take my kids before I got it figured out, because things were bad. And it was 2011 before he did. That's when he just lifted addictions from my life, all in one moment. So, and it doesn't happen like that for everybody. I mean, it just doesn't, but I'm very, very grateful. You know, I love this. It's not the well who need a doctor, but the sick. I saved one picture from my past, and I had it locked on my Facebook page where no one else could see it but me. And when I started to do this work, thank you. We have a few minutes. I mean, if you guys want to do questions, we can do questions. So, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very inspirational. A couple of questions. Is Circles a faith-based organization?
No. There's an incredible amount of faith in Circles, but it is not. It's not faith-based, and so you're allowed to share your faith, but we really believe for us to reclaim communities, for communities to get better and to be able to work together, that we need to sit next to all kinds of people. And so Circles is not faith-based. You'll find, though, that Circles is housed in many churches. So the First United Methodist Church, while we're not faith-based, they still claimed it as a mission. And so, but yes, and it's crazy, but we've had 9 people join churches in our Circles community. 8 of those people had faith already. They just didn't have a church family. And they would get close to their allies, and then somehow that was like they got brought in through the side door. You know what I mean? And so, now they have church families. They've joined churches officially. And Sherry, the mom that you saw there, took her a long time, but her and her 2 little kids are in church every Sunday. And it was interesting because our pastor said she was looking for, what middle school age youth could help with sound. And she looked and she saw out of, all of the families that attended church that Sherry's son had the best attendance. And so she approached him. And so I just thought that was interesting. And Sherry has grown in her faith. And so anyways, yeah, not faith-based.
And could you make a comment or address, I've been struggling here trying to phrase this, who shoulders the primary responsibility to address poverty? The government?
Community.
The church? The private sector? I think a lot of people
Well, you know, and there's no silver bullet, you know what I mean? And so I just think we have to we have to arm ourselves with a lot of different approaches. It was interesting. I did a mental model of poverty, and it was a live action thing. We went and we picked up items that showed us what we thought causes were, and a whole bunch of us did it in a room, and then you wrote stuff down, and you put it into categories. And what I found interesting about myself was that, and you could name your own categories, and I named individual, community, and world. And most all of my pieces of paper fell under community. And so that was interesting for me to realize that I think that we're going to get further faster if we stop looking out for help and we start looking here. You know, and this is hard work. It's hard work, but every school system that I've looked at in Kansas, poverty is growing. You know, in McPherson, in the last 9 years, it raised 30%. I mean, that's just startling. I mean, I didn't even realize that, because we live in a world we don't notice these things happening. So, you know, my opinion is that it's community, and you meet people with love, and you empower them, and you embrace them. Ultimately, the family's going to have to do it. You know, that's what I tell my families. I mean, we're not going to do this for you. We can't. We'll do it with you. And I think our culture, we're designed to do to the poor and for the poor, but we don't do with the poor. And we need to get into a behavior doing with.
Wow, thank you. Excellent response. Thank you for sharing with us.
Yes. You know, classism in America is very alive and well, but we don't like to talk about that. You know, we don't want to own that, and so I think it's normal. And people in poverty judge people in middle class. And what I found interesting is I'll work with a lot of middle class people, and they love families in poverty, but they judge wealthy people. You know, and so we just do that. I mean, it's just different. And so, you know, how do we expand our circle? One thing inside of circles is that the allies are never allowed to give money, because when you give money, you change the relationship. You know, and it just changes the dynamics. We have car donations that happen for families, which is really important because transportation is huge for families to get out. But the families have to work and do reciprocity or service work to get the cars so that they've got skin in the game and they feel good about it. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of fear that you know, I always have people tell me, they're like, I'm not qualified to get somebody out of poverty. And I'm like, you're not qualified to get someone out of poverty, but are you qualified to be a friend? You know, are you qualified to spend time with someone as they find their own path and work towards their own things? And are you qualified to learn and become curious? You know, to answer what you said, I think someone gave me something very powerful, and they said, Rebecca, when we can step out of a place of judgment and get into a mindset of curiosity, so much fun can happen. We just become curious about people instead of thinking this is right or wrong. So. Is that the bell? Okay, cool. There's a bell. Okay, thank you.